If you are looking for a bellwether defining the nature of contemporary Iranian-Azerbaijani relations, you could do no better than throwing a piercing glance at the discourse surrounding the Zangazur Corridor project. If you wish to envision a larger picture, take a step back and see the developments from afar. Despite this, because the presentism will weigh heavily on your observable environs, you will end up eyeing the geopolitics of the same route. The precept is there. It just needs unpacking, reorganizing, and repacking. Iran's cantankerous posturing over the Zangazur Corridor, an ambitious project aimed at connecting Azerbaijan with its Nakhchivan exclave via an overland passage traversing Armenia, could largely be explained in the light of its persistent inability to come to terms with the outcome of the Second Karabakh War. However, on a deeper level, it's more of a continuation of an old design, the roots of which date back to an earlier phase. When Azerbaijan regained its independence in 1991, the relations with Iran started with cranial fogginess and a dose of optimism, but it needed a pinprick of an event to set the tone. Historic and cultural ties seem to suggest that there would be an affinity which Baku and Tehran saw from different lenses, as Iran, for the substantial part of its history until its reconstruction under the Pahlavis along dominant ethnic national lines in the 20th century, had been heavily impacted by Turkic dynasties and concomitant influences, giving rise to the Turco-Persian tradition. It was not an obscure neighbor for newly independent Azerbaijan. The Islamic Republic's sizable minority, around 35 million of ethnic Azerbaijanis, was another megalithic consideration shaping attitudes towards Iran. For Tehran, this affinity had a different meaning. Its perception of Azerbaijan as a realm falling under its civilizational purview was actively voiced and perpetuated with some ingratiation and sometimes with undeniable swagger. In Azerbaijan, Iran saw a potentially fertile space in which to infiltrate its religious theocracy with the hope that historic ties, based on cultural religious commonalities, would prove conducive to the slow yet progressive erosion of the secularism of its neighbor. Since the 1990s, Baku has charted a different course, much to the dismay of the clerical regime in Tehran, building on a robust Azerbaijani national identity that hinges on Turkic essentials, secularism, and later incorporated multiculturalism. In its foreign relations, Azerbaijan has maintained overall balance, but forged a strong alliance with Turkey, and much to the chagrin of Iran, developed close military intelligence links with Israel. Eventually, the nascent air of affinity proved short-lived and gave way to mutual mistrust. During the First Karabakh War, Iran backed Yerevan, seeing in the imperiled state of Azerbaijan some advantages to its foreign policy design. Tehran was to act as a big player with ulterior motives, helping the crisis escalate and then stepping in to offer its conciliatory offices for a ceasefire. Despite adopting this mendacious approach, it was Russia that pulled the strings during that campaign, despite Iran having a stake. Once Armenian gains outstripped Yerevan's own wildest dreams, Tehran, in a practical sense, tilted towards the idea that Baku had lost enough, and further aggression was not in Iran's own interest. Between the two Karabakh wars, Tehran superficially tried to achieve balance vis-à-vis the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflict, supporting Baku on paper, yet duplicitously lending significant material support to Yerevan, easing the encumbrances caused by its economic isolation and deliberately emboldening its stance against Azerbaijan. The Second Karabakh War of 2020 was a development that Iran neither saw coming nor wanted to happen, as the status quo suited it best. This campaign was a sea change moment in the geopolitical evolution of the South Caucasus, completely reversing the fortunes of Azerbaijan and Armenia, increasing Turkish clouds and enabling Russia to fulfill its objective of placing its so-called peacekeepers in Karabakh, albeit on a temporary basis. For Iran, the post-war landscape presents a new reality with fresh challenges. Firstly, Azerbaijan regained control of the whole swath of its southern border with Iran, re-establishing the official demarcation line between the two states. This meant the loss of unrestricted Iranian access to the formerly occupied territories, thereby putting an end to the concomitant ill-gotten gains that had previously been voraciously enjoyed by Iranian businesses, with the likely go-ahead of Tehran, making the best use of the lawlessness that emanated during the Armenian occupation. Secondly, the Zangazur Corridor appeared on the horizon. This ambitious project is a subject in relation to which Armenia and Iran are utterly united. Yerevan's extraterritoriality concerns hinge on the thought that such a connection going through its southernmost territory will be tantamount to an effective loss of sovereignty. Article 9 of the Trilateral Ceasefire Declaration of November 2020 stipulates that the access should be unrestricted and unobstructed to ensure the unimpeded movement of persons, goods and cargo, with the border guard services of the Russian Federal Security Services having a controlling element along the passage. Iran, on the whole, is not officially against such a route, but it is firmly against what it calls changing borders in the Caucasus, defining this as its red line. On the 19th of July, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, during a meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Tehran, stated that any effort to block the border between his country and Armenia would be firmly opposed. The same line was reiterated in the Iranian reaction to the recent September escalation on the Azerbaijani-Armenian state border, which resulted in some military gains for Baku in the undelimited zone of the intersection of the two states. Then of course one has to dwell on a plethora of other considerations. The Zangazur Corridor gives Azerbaijan an augmented role in the east-west route, also benefiting other actors. Iran, for its part, might think it is being cheated out of the prize. As Stephen Blank, Senior Research Fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, recently wrote in The National Interest that theoretically the easiest route of transport should be through Iran. However, given US sanctions and chronic underinvestment in Iranian railways, it is hard to see it as a secure or reliable option. There is also an unhealthy dose of conspiracy theory infiltrating the Iranian rhetoric. For instance, Ahmed Kazemi, an expert on Caucasian studies, who is not a government official but is believed to be linked to Iranian intelligence, in an interview with Pars Today, argued that the project, which he dubbed the Tehran-NATO Corridor, is a joint British-Israeli plot to undermine Tehran's geopolitical interests and prepare the ground for NATO's subtle expansion into the Caspian, nearing the Chinese realm of influence. His claim seems to have been heavily influenced by that which Adam Thompson, former British representative to NATO, allegedly stated regarding the implications of the Second Karabakh War. There is also a view peddled in the Iranian and Armenian media that the war of 2020 had an ostensible aim of targeting Iran, with the view of curbing its influence. These all seem to ascribe an inflated import to Iran's position in the grand scheme of things, marginalizing the actual underpinning of the geopolitical triggers that led to the eruption of hostilities between Azerbaijan and Armenia at the time. There is also another less visible aspect to the Iranian posturing, which points to the realm of Tehran-Yerevan military cooperation. Although Iran acknowledged the verdict of the Second Karabakh War and congratulated Baku on its victory between clenched teeth, there have been some indications that, in practice, it shares the sentiments of the warmongering party in Yerevan. Robert Cutler, senior fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, believes that Tehran is trying harder than ever to assert itself overtly in the South Caucasus through the instrument of the Armenian military industry complex. The presence of Iranian military companies on Armenian soil has increased at an unprecedented rate, with laser and communication system and drone manufacturers being the most involved. The enduring ties linking the Kochari and Sarkisyan remnants in the Armenian army and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps are also a factor to be reckoned with. Tehran is also, albeit understandably, concerned about Israeli involvement in Azerbaijan. This is not a new pattern, but has assumed a heightened significance over the past few years. When George Deek, Israeli ambassador in Baku, posted his photo on Twitter reading a book titled Mysterious Tales of Tabriz with the wording, "I'm learning so much about the Azerbaijani city of Tabriz," in July of this year, Iran felt enraged by this allegedly polemical act. Abbas Mousavi, Iranian ambassador to Baku, retorted with a warning in the jargon befitting the Islamic Republic's known uncompromising anti-Israeli belligerence. Apparently, the first evil Zionist is going to be buried by the zealous people of Tabriz, too. "Never cross our red line ever," exclaimed the diplomat in non-too-diplomatic terms. The deep causes of the acrimony lie far deeper, of course. The tight Tel Aviv-Baku relations are based on mutual interests and their perpetuation into wider geopolitical space. Azerbaijan has benefited from the purchase of cutting-edge Israeli weaponry to augment its defense capabilities. And as a recent article published in Breaking Defense suggests, in theory, Azerbaijan may offer up its airspace for Israeli jets to enter Iranian territory if needed. To date, Baku has been extremely careful to arrange its partnership with Israel in such a diplomatic manner that would not give rise to substantial Iranian protestation. As was stated at the outset, the Zangazur project is a focal point. It's a direct takeaway from the 10 November ceasefire deal that Armenia has still not fully implemented. The project has made its way into the practical dimension through the war, the consequences of which continue to befuddle a bemused Iran. Hence, any dispute between Baku and Tehran over the subject provides common ground for Iran and Armenia to feel united in their grievances. Iran may be protective towards external impurities, more than stealthily sanctioned by its domestic authorities, but it can never be accused of failing to stick its head above the parapet. Operating off the grid in international affairs is not alien to it. Iran likes to be heard. It firmly believes it has a mission. All in all, the true origin of Iranian angst is the agony of self-knowledge. If one may borrow from former British Prime Minister and now late Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher's insight on the character of Germany, the contexts differ indeed violently, but there is a linchpin rendering the appropriation legitimate. Modern Iran is tormented by the knowledge of the futility of its values and consequent international aspirations. Its governance system cannot be replicated in any advanced civilized society. Azerbaijan will continue to steadfastly obviate the possibility of falling victim to its wrath. If enough Iranian influence is entrenched in Armenia, the latter will risk becoming a failed state, reminding some of the features of Lebanon. The contemporary unrest in Iran shows with uncanny honesty that the Islamic Republic has nurtured little that is admirable and worthy of being interpolated into one's own system of values. Tehran may dismiss Azerbaijan, and sometimes do so with impunity. Nevertheless, the shifting sands of the wider geopolitical landscape point towards a different reality. History will judge who is better to learn from whom. Stay tuned to caliber.az to keep up to date.